Hello everyone, and welcome to my next video. Now I know you're all waiting for the Final Wars Godzilla vs Monsterverse Godzilla video, and that is in the works, but I wanted to make a different video because I felt like making this video because I've had it planned for a while. Today in this video we're going to be going over the Godzilla Timeline, or the many Godzilla Timelines. This is going to be confusing, and it's one of the most confusing things I've ever had to do, but I've made it. And here we are. This is up to date, and well, up to date to today. Something could change tomorrow and this video will be outdated. But here we are. To what we know, this is every Godzilla timeline that we know of. Starting with the Showa era. The first thing is completely headcanon, but in my headcanon, the original King Kong is canon to this era. This is just headcanon, but if you want to believe it like I do, then go ahead. But the real Showa timeline goes Gojira, which is the first in a lot of timelines. Then it goes Godzilla Raids Again, Rodan, Varan, Mothra, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Atragon, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Invasion of Astro Monster, Frankenstein Conquers the World. However, it's only really canon because, well, there's two versions of the movie, one in which the giant octopus appears, which would link it to King Kong vs. Godzilla, and the other version where Baragon appears, though the Baragon version is definitely more well-known, and that explains Baragon. Ebra Horror from the Deep, King Kong Escapes, Son of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Godzilla vs. Gigan, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla, and the timeline ends with Destroy All Monsters. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've probably never heard of Atragon or King Kong Escapes before. If you have, then, well, that's good. But if you haven't, then you're probably a more newer fan. Atragon is canon because it has Manta in it, who is a kaiju that appears in the Godzilla movies. King Kong Escapes is canon because it has King Kong in it, who was in a prior movie, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and it has Gorosaurus in it. So that's kind of why they're canon, but they really just canon to introduce new kaiju into the Godzilla franchise. So it's kind of weird. You could say they aren't canon and that those kaiju just appear, but they are meant to be canon officially, so that's what we're going to go with here. The next timeline is a much simpler timeline, the Heisei era. It goes Gojira, the Mysterians, Return of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Biollante, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Now, I know that you probably know that Gojira and all the other films are canon, but the Mysterians is probably not one you thought was canon. But, well, Mogira in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is, in the lore, inspired by the Mogira that the Mysterians made. I think that's Mogira's origins in the Mysterians. I haven't seen it, I don't know a lot about it, but I'm pretty sure that's it. So the Mysterians is canon to the Heisei, and this was confirmed. It could also be hinted at that the Rodan and Mothra movies are canon, since when those characters appear, the human characters in universe know who Rodan and Mothra are, but there's no official confirmation that these are canon, whereas with the Mysterians there is pretty good evidence it's canon. I think someone even said it when they made Godzilla Space Godzilla, so that's the Heisei timeline. Now we move on to the very simple TriStar timeline, which is just Godzilla 1998 and Godzilla series. That's it, they never continued it, and there was no prequel to it. The My Goji timeline goes Gojira and Godzilla 2000, another simple one. Then we get the Giro Goji timeline, which is just Godzilla vs. Megaguirus with no film before it or after it, because the original Gojira is sort of canon, but Godzilla doesn't die to the Oxygen Destroyer in this timeline, so it's just this movie, since the prior events are, well, they would be canon if they weren't altered. Next up we get the GMK timeline, which goes Gojira, Godzilla 1998, and GMK. 98 is canon because in the movie they do directly reference the events of that film, meaning that yes, that movie is canon to the GMK timeline. It's weird because that means that Zilla, the kaiju running away from the military and being, well, just a scaredy cat, is in the same timeline as GMK Godzilla, who was pure evil, destroying everything in his path. Interesting, but I don't hate it. And it also means that 1998 and 54 share continuity in a universe, which is not something I want to think about. But now we get to the Kiryu Saga timeline. Now, I'm just going to say it. In my head, this timeline goes Gojira, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and Tokyo SOS. But according to official information, this timeline goes Gojira, Rodan, Varan, Mothra, Gorath, Atragon, Dogora, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, War of the Gargantuas, King Kong Escapes, Space Amoeba, then Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla Tokyo SOS. That timeline made no sense. It's full of random Showa era movies which don't play. Like, the only other one that matters is the original Mothra movie and Space Amoeba, because, well, Mothra has Mothra in it, who appears in the Kira Saga, and Space Amoeba has Kamawabus in it, who appears in these movies. Rodan, Varan, Gorath, Atragon, Space Amoeba, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, War of the Gargantuas, and King Kong Escapes have nothing to do with the main films of this canon anyway. Like, I don't get it. I don't get this timeline. It makes no sense, and if you were going to watch this timeline in order, just watch Gojira, Mothra, Space Amoeba, Mechagodzilla, and then Tokyo SOS. Don't bother watching the others, because it doesn't make any sense. Now moving on to the Final Wars timeline, and it's just Final Wars. You know, you look in the film, there is a opening credit scene which has dates and kaiju attacking in those years, but that doesn't mean there's a timeline. It just means that happened, but there's no prior timeline. The original Gojira is semi-canon, but Godzilla survived and turned into Final Wars Godzilla, so yeah, that's that. Now we get into the MonsterVerse timeline, which is recently changed due to Legacy and Monsters. The timeline goes Kong Skull Island, the Skyline and Anime, Skull Island, the Birth of Kong, Godzilla 2014, Monarch Legacy and Monsters, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla Dominion, Kingdom Kong, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. I know you're wondering, where's Godzilla Aftershock and Godzilla Awakening? Well, Shinomura from Godzilla Awakening was didn't exist in the G14 bits where we see 50s Godzilla being nuked, which is supposedly when Shinomura appeared. Also in Legacy of Monsters, Shinomura doesn't appear in the 50s when it should have appeared, so that means it's pretty much confirmed that Shinomura is no longer canon. As for Muto Prime, well, it could be canon, it's just not canon officially, because the producer of Legacy of Monsters said that Godzilla's dorsal plate change was due to damage received in the 2014 fight in the Mutos and other stuff in that movie. So that means that technically Muto Prime doesn't exist, though I think it does exist, because otherwise Dagon makes no sense and he was in G14, but it's just that Muto Prime never awoke to fight Godzilla after the events of G14. That's my justification for it, and I think it makes good sense. Next up, we get the timeline of Shin Godzilla, which is Shin Godzilla. It has no continuation, the other Shin movies aren't canon to it from what I know, and yeah, it's just its own movie. And then we get the timeline of the anime trilogy, which consists of the 3 movies and the 2 prequel books, which are apparently a lot better than the films themselves. The timeline starts off with Godzilla Monster Apocalypse, and then Godzilla Project Mechagodzilla, those being the prequel novels. And then we get the anime trilogy, Godzilla Planet of Monsters, City on the Edge of Battle, and the Planet Eater. That's a pretty boring timeline, but apparently it has a good beginning with the prequel books, but they have no English translation to what I know, so we can't read them. Then we get 3 very simple timelines. The Singular Point timeline is just Godzilla Singular Point. The -1 timeline is just -1. And then we get the real world with Godzilla's Revenge, since Godzilla's Revenge apparently takes place in the real world and is not canon to the Showa era. And that is every Godzilla timeline with my own interpretations and thoughts put on it. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. I might put this on my community post, about a post of just this simplified for you, if you want to look at it. But yeah, that is every Godzilla timeline. It's confusing, it makes no sense. Well, it does make sense. Every individual timeline makes sense, except for the Kiryu Saga. You cannot tell me the Kiryu Saga makes complete sense to me, because it doesn't. It doesn't make sense. Barely any of those movies make sense to be canon. They have no implication on the Kiryu Saga. But here we are. We have it. Here it is. And that is going to be me, signing off now, because I have nothing more to say. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like, maybe subscribe if you're feeling generous. And I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.